Welcome to November, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Marco's Pizza. I hope you had a great time with your Halloween. I'm sure you did, and thanks for being with us here today. Some of you may be running a little late to work or whatever, but nonetheless, we appreciate you squeezing in our program, making it a part of your day. We got a fun show coming up. It's David Green later on. David is a guy that was adamant the entire season that he thought that Jake Fromm would eventually emerge as Georgia's quarterback and the quarterback that you could trust during the stretch run of the season after Fromm played very well against Florida this past Saturday. I'm sure David will have some very interesting things to say about that. There is also a lot of talk coming out of Kentucky. That is a little bit of a salty bunch right now, heading towards the Georgia game on Saturday. We'll start our show with that. We'll actually squeeze in a little bit of recruiting talk here as well. So fully loaded and a great day for you to be with us. DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, begins right now.
From DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Marco's Pizza. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Getting really excited about Saturday, Georgia and Kentucky. I just love big games with a lot on the line. It seems like the month of November gives you a lot of that. You wouldn't want it any other way, and the Dogs and the Wildcats Saturday afternoon at 3:30 is going to be another example of that. Now, for Georgia, this is all very simple. Georgia's going on the road here, looking to win the game, ultimately own the East, the three words we've said that really matters this week, the chance to do that and be back in the SEC championship game, and then who really knows what happens after that, but the domino that needs to fall next is the win against Kentucky, so all of that can matter. On the other side, though, the Kentucky stuff is a little more interesting, and what it really does is, to use a Halloween phrase here, it kind of stirs the cauldron just a bit because there's a lot of apparently doubters of Kentucky out there. And as you might imagine, the national media, I don't know if you call it criticism or just maybe an overall general state of disregard, the way the national media seems to scoff at Kentucky, who was number 9 in the college football playoff top 25 when it was announced on Tuesday night, the way that the national media just kind of brushes all this aside has made the Wildcats maybe a little extra salty going into this game on Saturday, which I do think from a Georgia standpoint is relevant because I think it impacts the way that Kentucky's going to play. And they could go one of two ways here. You know, Kentucky could say, hey, we're going to have that nobody believes in us card, that magical formula that seems to sometimes work in sports, and we're going to go out there and show everybody how wrong they are. Or you can go the other way here, which is all of a sudden now you're going to press harder and you're going to try to be 125% of yourself in a game that you've just never really felt the feelings that you're going to feel in this game. Kentucky does not play in football games as big as the one that's going to play this Saturday very often here, and so there is a challenge of emotionally how you handle all of that. But before we get to that part of it, let me set up kind of what's been said here and how Kentucky's responding. Kentucky was number 9 in the poll when it came out on Saturday, and as I said, some national media folks immediately said, what is going on here? Let me give you an example. Radio host Doug Gottlieb from, I believe it's Fox Sports Radio, I believe. Kentucky was 9, Ohio State was 10 in the first poll, but Gottlieb says on Twitter, exactly 0 real human beings believe that Kentucky is better than Ohio State. And Gottlieb's probably somewhat correct about this when it comes to the overall common opinion. Most people probably would assume that Ohio State's the better team here. But Ohio State also got waxed by Purdue. So let's not act like Ohio State's some sort of perfect team. And we haven't seen Kentucky get beat up that bad. They went on the road to Texas A&M and, lost a close, well-fought, tightly contested game here. But it's not like they embarrassed themselves in College Station the way that Ohio State embarrassed itself in West Lafayette, Indiana against Purdue. So, even if the common opinion would suggest that Ohio State's better, that doesn't mean that the public's right. The public is often wrong, but nonetheless, that was Doug Gottlieb's opinion. Another Fox Sports guy, and I think it's always really funny here, that the most ardent SEC criticism always comes from people who work for networks that don't televise SEC games. Fox Sports has got, a Pac-12 contract. They do some Big Ten games, a lot of Big 12 games. They don't have any relationship with the SEC whatsoever. So you don't hear a lot of SEC love coming from the Fox Sports folks because they've got a vested interest, a business relationship with the other conferences. It's probably not a coincidence that the analysts that work for that network end up touting the other teams from the other leagues and not touting the SEC very much. You can always draw a line back to money when it comes to everything in college sports, and this is no different than that. One of the Fox Sports analysts is Joel Klatt. He also put out on Twitter his I guess, undervalued, overvalued teams after the first college football playoff top 25. He says the undervalued teams, you don't really care much about these: Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Utah, Washington, and whoever NUFB family is. I'm not even sure which Twitter account that's for, but nonetheless, he says overvalued is LSU, Kentucky. Look at all these SEC teams that the Fox Sports guy doesn't like. LSU, Kentucky, Florida. He also says UCF and North Carolina State and Iowa State. He says the most overvalued, this is Joel Klatt on Twitter, the most overvalued team is easily Kentucky, which was down to 11 to Missouri with 6 minutes left. So guys like Joel Klatt, guys like Doug Gottlieb say Kentucky's overvalued, they don't belong at number 9, and maybe the subtext here is that'll be proven on Saturday when they play against Georgia. So Kentucky's going to try to use that as a little bit of motivation here and try to make that be a part of the storyline going into this game on Saturday. One of the outspoken Kentucky players is Cash Daniel. For whatever reason, we've talked about Daniel on this show already a few times over the last few weeks because he's kind of an interesting personality. Maybe a little bit of a blowhard, but kind of an interesting personality. And Daniel was, kind of talking about some of this kind of stuff. And in the midst of talking about how proud he was of what his team's been able to accomplish this year, he had a little bit of a shot at some of the national media who he views as taking a shot at him. Here is Cash Daniel speaking with the media this week.
I mean, we're all really, proud of what we've accomplished, but, there's still a long year to go. This is what we've worked our butts off for year in and year out, to get, get in the top 10 and get the recognition that I think we've earned. A lot of people hate that, but we're here, so deal with it.
I mean, that's the most old and, classic storyline of them all, and I don't fault Cash Daniel for playing this card. But he's not the first one to play this card. Oh, the national media hates this. They don't want to see Kentucky in this spot. They don't want to see Kentucky at number 9. We're the outcast. We're the crasher to the party here. They don't want to see us here. National media doesn't like this. Now, I just gave you a couple of examples of the national media probably not liking this. But Cash Daniel clearly wants to grab onto that, and as one of the vocal leaders of Kentucky wants to play that card. The reporters gathered around Daniel, heard that word, hate. National media hates this. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, Cash? And Daniel, who's never slow to talk about anything, jumped on that to kind of explain his reasoning for why he thinks the national media apparently hates Kentucky, Georgia's opponent on Saturday. Here's a little more from Cash Daniel.
But when you look at the national media, and they're saying, well, Kentucky's, I think, honestly, I think it's got something to do with they're used to seeing Kentucky, all basketball season, whooping up on people. They're like, well, Kentucky's actually good in another sport. So I think that's the factor that they don't want to see us succeed. That anybody outside of this state, doesn't want to see us succeed.
So I think it's really interesting from Cash Daniel. He says that there's fatigue when it comes to Kentucky basketball, that they don't want to see us now also succeed in football. I mean, listen, I cover a lot of these stories from time to time. We talk about a lot of these types of things from time to time. I think when it comes to stuff like this, the national media just likes the things that have happened before, right? I think the national media is always a little slow to properly cover and properly, provide context for something that's new, something that's unexpected. The national media would just rather sometimes rubber stamp the same story that it wrote last year, the same TV segment that it produced last year. It doesn't necessarily want to have the confusing nature of doing something that it has not done before. So, nonetheless, it's probably not a surprise that Cash Daniel and the Kentucky Wildcats are saying ahead of Georgia, hey, nobody believes in us, and we're going to go out there and prove them wrong on Saturday. But what is ironic about all of this is while the national media is completely showing a level of disregard for Kentucky, not really the number 9 team, not really a team that's capable of going out there and proving itself to be among the national elite, for this particular game on Saturday, the point spread is going in a completely different direction. The national media is showing no respect for Kentucky. But if you watch the way the point spread is moving at MyBookie and other online sports books, what you see is the point spread actually moving in the direction of the Wildcats. When the thing opened at the beginning of the week, Georgia was solidly a double-digit favorite. Was it 12.5? Is that what Georgia opened as? 11.5. Georgia opens at 11.5. It's been down to 9.5. What I've seen, I saw somebody put on a message board that had gone down to 8.5. Now I didn't see 8.5 in any book, but I have seen 9.5. So while the national media writes its stories and tweets its tweets about nobody believing in Kentucky, there is at least a certain aspect that the point spread players, the betting community, apparently they do believe in Kentucky a little bit. And what's ironic about that is Kentucky's coming off a game against Missouri where it really didn't look that good on the road. It was losing, as Joel Klatt said, very late in the game. And Georgia against Florida probably played better against a big league opponent than it has at any point in time this year, but the point spread community is still showing a little respect for the Wildcats. The bottom line is that even though this is not the big game we thought we would have at the beginning of the year, Georgia's biggest challenge or Georgia's game to determine who's going to own the East, I don't know that any of us would have predicted it to be Kentucky, but that is what it is. And I do expect it to feel like a big atmosphere on Saturday. And while I don't have great respect necessarily for Kentucky overall, certainly on offense, I think they're very much a work in progress. Defensively, this is a good team. I think they've got Georgia's attention. I think they've got Georgia's respect. No matter what the national media thinks about the Wildcats, they are a formidable foe for Georgia on Saturday. It's a game that I ultimately think the Dogs emerge in, but it's also a real challenge here and a real fun game to watch. And I guess around DawgNation, we wouldn't have it any other way. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Marco's Pizza. Welcome to November, and thanks so much for being with us here on the program today. No matter how you get to us, live on video, 10 a.m., DawgNation Facebook, YouTube, Twitter feed, radio, also at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and in podcast form, wherever podcasts can be found. The world-famous DawgNation.com included. We are glad that you have found DawgNation Daily here today. And by the way, for those of you that watch the show on video but occasionally have to miss from time to time, you know, the podcast is a great way to keep up to date with everything that's going on. Maybe you're an Apple Podcast subscriber or you're an Apple iPhone user, the Apple Podcast player. Subscribe there, and you'll always have the show delivered to you on demand for you to listen to anytime. Maybe that you miss it either on the radio or video or however you normally consume the program. I told you last night, you know, that Halloween means pizza in my family and pizza means Marco's Pizza. And if you are feeling this kind of the same way, or maybe just after a long night of trick-or-treating and hanging out and getting dressed up, maybe tonight you're just too tired to cook, maybe think about Marco's Pizza here. They bring DawgNation Daily to you every single day, and they also bring you authentic Italian quality pizza every day as well. It's every store, every day, the Italian way. Check them out at marcos.com and take advantage of a great everyday offer. No coupon to a clip, no promo code to remember, just simply 2 medium, 2 topping pizzas for $6.99 each. It's an everyday value there at Marcos. Go to marcos.com to find the Marcos nearest you. I'm really excited here in a couple of minutes. We're going to welcome in the great former Georgia quarterback David Green. It's always fun to talk to David. We'll look forward to doing that here coming up in just a couple of minutes as well. I want to do more on Georgia-Kentucky before we get there. You know, I just gave you the Kentucky side of this a bit. Kentucky feels disrespected. Kentucky feels like that this is a game which it can go out and prove against Georgia why all the doubters about Kentucky are wrong. And as I alluded to a moment ago, there's a challenge there about not getting too hyped, not getting too emotional. And I played just some audio from Cash Daniel a moment ago, and one of the other things that Daniel said within the context of that conversation was, hey, this is the biggest game he's ever played in. And obviously there's a temptation to be, you know, a little too intense when it comes to stuff like that. And that's one of the reasons why in a game like this, I always favor the team that has been in these kinds of games more. You know, Georgia has done that more. It's one of the reasons why I do like Georgia to win on Saturday. They're just more comfortable in this environment. And this is probably also one of those moments in which something that sometimes, admittedly, I probably don't love about Kirby Smart, it actually does work out pretty well in games like this. You may have heard me in the past, and maybe I even said this last week, that I wish sometimes Kirby Smart would emphasize rivalry games a little more. Hey, we're playing Florida. This game really matters this week. We know how much DawgNation wants to win this game. Sometimes Kirby takes the tact of, all the games are important. All the games are the same. We're trying to win every single one of them. And sometimes against a team like Florida or Auburn in 2 weeks, you know, that doesn't sound as much fun. That doesn't sound like what you want to hear, the red meat that the constituency wants to chew on. And yet when you get to a place like Kentucky, a game that fans at the beginning of the season wouldn't have circled, well, that mentality of, hey, we approach things the same way every single week, all of a sudden that mentality really works out here, and that Kentucky gets the same fired-up version of Georgia that Florida did last Saturday. It's one of the things I do think that's made Kirby Smart a very good coach, even though that sometimes the script that he writes for himself is not the one that I would write for him as a fan of the team. But nonetheless, from a mentality standpoint, it's hard to deny that Kirby's really good at getting his team ready for games like this, and he talked this week about what that process is like and how he does get the right emotional pitch from the team going on the road here with the division on the line. Here is Kirby.
Players get it. They know what's at stake. I don't know that you have to build that up. I mean, this game is exactly what it is. I mean, it's an opportunity to earn the right to win your division, and they got a great program. We got a great program, and it's at their place. It's going to be a great atmosphere. we really build this program on being neutral and understanding that every game is just as important as the other. Because if the other games weren't important, we wouldn't be in this position in this game. And they just get bigger and bigger from here. So that's the way we look at it.
So Kentucky's going down the road of the national media hates us. We got to prove them wrong. Kirby Smart says his team's trying to be neutral and just go about a business-like approach, business trip up to Lexington to come back owning the East with the division in hand. I think in this case, I'll take the Georgia mindset over the Kentucky mindset. It's one of the reasons why I like the Dogs to win. It's great to have you here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza. And, of course, here on this program, we celebrate the things that happen on the football field for Georgia. We also celebrate the great heritage of higher learning that the University of Georgia has been a part for a long time. And, you know, I think the story of how this all came to be is pretty interesting. It all started with an idea and a moment there. 30 years old, Abraham Baldwin crafted one of the most groundbreaking documents in our nation's early history. It was the charter that established the University of Georgia as the birthplace of public higher education. It was written all the way back in 1785. The establishment of UGA launched a great tradition of world-class public higher education, creating tens of millions of informed citizens, scientists, and entrepreneurs. Well, today, UGA remains committed to academic excellence and continues to lead the way for public education and innovation. Research from our universities also improved the lives and impacted the communities across the world. And you can be a part of this as well to make sure that mission continues, and then the success that the academic side of the University of Georgia has enjoyed, that it continues. The way to get involved with that and show your pride for your alma mater, the University of Georgia, is to go to this website, give.uga.edu. Give.uga.edu. It's a great way to support and continue the founder's quest for that academic excellence that's been true since 1785 and will be true for years to come. Great to have you a part of the program. We got some recruiting talk later on. Pretty important update on a couple key UGA recruits. But for now, let's get ready to say hello to our buddy David Green. He is the great former Georgia quarterback, and he is always a terrific guest for us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza. It is David Green here on DawgNation Daily. And, David, I know that coming up next Saturday, another big autograph signing going to take place there at Tailgate Apparel, 279 East Broad Street in downtown Athens. I will look forward to hearing more from you about that coming up in just a moment. But if you don't mind, let me start with this question before we get to that. You know, you were very clear on a lot of our broadcasts over the last few weeks that you're a big believer in Jake Fromm, that you thought this was his team, and you stayed, I guess, steadfast with Fromm even after his struggles against LSU. Well, he validated your confidence in him and the confidence of everybody else with how he played against Florida on Saturday. How nice was that for you to see that Fromm once again showed that he was still the same quarterback that led Georgia to the playoff a year ago?
Well, it was great to see, not just for me, but obviously the entire Georgia fan base. You know, look, let's face it. I mean, you know, Jake is human just like the rest of us, and let's not forget. I mean, you turn on the TV on a Sunday from time to time, and you may see Tom Brady actually have a bad game every now and then. You know, so the tough part about it, you know, the world we live in this day and time, you know, it's all about, you know, what you did today, and I understand some of that, but yeah, I don't know how you could really lose confidence in Fromm, to be honest with you. I mean, the way he played last year as a true freshman, took us to the national championship. You know, he's done well up to this point, although, you know, it was kind of hard to almost match the level that he played, you know, most of last season. But the way he played, especially in the second half, he was so big on third downs, and he was clutch. And he wasn't just making, you know, easy throws. I mean, he was – that little third down throw we made to Terry Godwin, I mean, that was a big time throw.
No doubt about that. And you're one of the few people probably within our, you know, sphere of listening here that actually has some idea of what it feels like to be Jake Fromm on a daily basis. And I think even you would admit that back in 2002, 2001 through 2004, there wasn't social media, and there wasn't some of the ways in which people can sort of communicate about college football now. But you do have experience having to block out the outside noise. And, you know, Jake Fromm had to do that going into the Florida game. What is that like, knowing that, hey, maybe I can't go read the newspaper, or I can't turn on the TV, maybe I don't want to listen to the radio or check in on a message board, that I got to make sure that I don't listen too much to that because I got a job to do, and I can't let other people's evaluation of my job distract me from my ultimate task? You know what that feels like in a way that someone like me can't even comprehend. What does it feel like to be Jake Fromm, though, when so many people are talking about you going into a game like Florida a week ago?
Well, I think it's on both ends of this. So when times, it's probably the first time Jake's felt the heat of that magnitude just from the fan base, because I mean, we've been fortunate enough the team's been extremely good when he's been under center, and we really haven't lost really hardly any games at all, and he's played extremely well. Now, it's important to be able to block it out. It's equally as important when times are really, really good as well, and everybody says, "Oh, you're the greatest thing ever. You know, you're going to be a Heisman Trophy type player," you know, and everybody's kind of feeding you that as well. It's really, I think the key is you really want to stay as even-keeled as possible. You know, typically when things are going great and everybody's telling you how great you are, you don't need to buy into that, because that's dangerous as well, because typically you're not as good as what everybody thinks you are when times are great. And then when times are bad and you lose a game and everybody's wanting your throat and they're wanting you to come out of the game, you're not as bad as what people are saying you are either. You're typically somewhere in the middle, and it's important as a quarterback to be honest with yourself and, you know, where am I not getting it done, and what are the things I need to work on, and but you know, it also comes down to confidence, being able to believe in yourself and know that you could do it, and clearly Jake's, you know, got plenty of confidence, and he showed it last week.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. You mentioned the big throw to Terry Godwin. I was also impressed with the way that he got J.J. Holloman, the sophomore wide receiver, involved. And, you know, when you see some of the things that Holloman does with the 2 touchdown catches that he provides, and you think, oh, maybe this is a guy that's becoming a go-to receiver. Now, Georgia's got a lot of different options at that, but that door for the most dependable, most, you know, top-of-the-line go-to receiver, I guess there's some debate to be had about that. What is that process like over the course of a season for a quarterback like Fromm or yourself back in your playing days, in terms of the chemistry that you develop that someone can kind of become a go-to receiver? How does that get established in season?
Well, it's about guys making plays in critical situations, and I think a great one, as you mentioned, you know, it was a 3rd and 9 or 10. It was a very low percentage type, you know, hit ratio when you look at it, and it was 3rd down, and you know, I think Fromm recognized the one-on-one coverage outside on Holloman, and he just, you could tell, either, you know, tapped his helmet or his thigh and said, basically meaning, hey, go to a go route here, let's just take a shot. And then when he goes up and makes a play, you know, the quarterback, you go, okay, if I get another one-on-one matchup like that, this guy will make the play. I know he can do it. So it's great to see, you know, when guys are out there and they recognize matchups, and then they got a matchup they like, and not only does Jay get confident, Holloman does as well, because he's going out there, he knows he's making those plays, and so it was good to see. Brandon, another thing I'd love to point out as well is, I know we talked about it about 2 weeks ago, is Georgia just hadn't had any balance offensively, and I really felt like in the second half was the first time that I was watching a game where I didn't really know if we were about to run or throw it. And I felt like we've been pretty predictable at certain points throughout this season, where I could almost line up and go, okay, here we are about to run it again, or we're about to throw it. I mean, nobody knew what was about to happen in the second half. It was great to see that balanced attack, and it works so well. And you can tell how much confidence, you know, Fromm gets as well when we're able to really have a balanced approach versus all pass or all run.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, David. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that was something a lot of fans enjoyed seeing with the game on Saturday. Something that Dog fans are hoping for this Saturday is the return of Ben Cleveland, the right guard. Hopefully back to health. There's, I guess, some debate about if that's going to indeed take place. But as a quarterback, how much does it help your confidence knowing you've got that, you know, fully healthy offensive line? It remains to be seen about, you know, Andrew Thomas in terms of how, you know, 100% he is coming off what happened against Florida, and then, you know, Cleveland hoping to come back here as well. How much better do you feel when you know you got the 5 in front of you that you would choose to have there? Cleveland's return would seem to be huge for Georgia, right?
Yeah, well, it's a lot of confidence, and let's face it. I mean, and I think, you know, Kirby said it earlier already this week. I mean, Kentucky may be one of the best defenses we're going to see all year long, and I know it's kind of hard for most Georgia fans to actually believe that, but it's true. I mean, if you watch this Kentucky, you know, this team on tape, I mean, they've got some really, really good players. I mean, they were talking about Allen, you know, the linebacker. I mean, he's a potential first-round draft pick.
Yeah.
So it's not just noise. They got some guys that can go out and play, and I think the most dangerous thing is, Brandon, they believe, and they believe that they belong. And it's one thing to come out and hope that you can win a game. That doesn't get it done. But when you're a team that actually fully believes that you're capable and you deserve to be in the moment, those guys are typically pretty tough to beat.
We talked to your buddy John Stinchcomb on the show a couple days ago about this. You played at Kentucky in 2002, and that was a pretty good atmosphere, right? I mean, that was a Kentucky team you talk about believing. They believed they had a chance to beat you that day. So not every former Georgia player knows what it's like to be in a pretty intense atmosphere in Lexington. But in 2002, a game y'all won, by the way, but y'all played in front of a pretty good crowd that day and a pretty good Kentucky team. So you were one of the few, I guess, former Georgia players that can say, you know what? I've seen Commonwealth Stadium, or Kroger Field as it's called now. I've seen that stadium when it's kind of intense for the opposing team. You do have some experience with that, right?
Yeah, no, and they were a good team. They weren't to the level that they are now. They were really explosive offensively. They were back then. They had Jared Lorenzen, and they could light up the scoreboard pretty good. That defensively, they struggled a good bit. The thing that makes this, Kentucky team, I think, really dangerous, especially with the fan base, is they've never been in this situation before. I mean, both teams were playing to clinch and win the East in this game. And then I think on top of it, it's really been a Cinderella-type season for Kentucky. I mean, when their backs have been against the wall, they've been able to come back and deliver some big key moments. And so it used to be when you get on top of Kentucky, everybody leaves the stadium because they didn't have confidence that their team could come back. That's not the case anymore. I mean, the whole fan base and everybody, in Lexington has bought into this team, and they're definitely going to fight till the final whistle.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And obviously the same thing's expected next Saturday when Georgia comes back to Athens. David, it seems like it's been 6 years since Georgia's played a home game, but next Saturday it is going to happen. Unfortunately, we still don't know what time the game's going to be, which is kind of I guess an irritating thing for those of us who are trying to make our pregame plans. And I guess that's the same thing to deal with there for Tailgate Apparel, 279 East Broad Street in downtown Athens. When you start thinking about that Christmas shopping list you got, Tailgate Apparel is a great way to think about stocking up for the dog fan in your life, especially with some of the sweatshirt, the fleecy stuff they've got coming up for the cold weather season. That is one of my favorite things to wear this time of year. Tailgate Apparel's got that. So, David, we know it'll be a big day at Tailgate before the game on next Saturday against Auburn. I guess we still don't quite exactly know what time it's all going to go down. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I don't know what time the time's going to be. The good news is we do have Tim Jennings committed,
Nice.
and so and that's going to be a great treat for the fans. I mean, Timmy J was one of the better DBs to ever come through Georgia, and even his pro career. I mean, this guy went out and had a couple of Pro Bowl seasons. I think he had a Pro Bowl when he was with the Chicago Bears. Lives back in the area now, and I know is excited to meet a lot of the fans and get back to Athens.
Yeah, what a cool thing to be able to catch up with Tim Jennings. That's next Saturday before the Auburn game. It's going to be fun to see Georgia back in Athens again after a long time away from home here. And no doubt a raucous atmosphere with the Tigers coming to town. And the great way to get that day started is at Tailgate Apparel, 279 East Broad Street. Tim Jennings there signing autographs before the game. That's going to be awesome. David, I really appreciate you being here today on DawgNation Daily. It's always fun to get your thoughts, and I think you gave Georgia fans a lot to chew on here today and a lot of reasons why you can be even more excited about that offense going into Kentucky this Saturday. We'll look forward to speaking to you again soon.
All right, Brandon. Appreciate you, buddy. Have a good one.
Really good stuff there from David Green, and I loved the line from David about for the first time all season long against Florida, I felt like I didn't know if I was going to pass it or if I was going to run it. I think that's really interesting because I do think that when Georgia's offense has been at its worst this season, it seemed like they were, stuck in that, rut of, hey, we're going to keep chopping, and it may not come to fruition what you want to see. Or it's one of those situations like seemed to happen at LSU where the defense that LSU was showing, all of a sudden now Georgia's throwing. Chip Towers wrote about this at DawgNation.com at one point, that in that LSU game, which was obviously the low water mark for the season, Georgia had these stretches where it would go run, and then another stretch would go pass. Then it had another stretch where it went, run, pass, which is obviously the almost the worst indictment of any kind of play caller when you get into that run on first, run on second, pass on third. It becomes very, very predictable. But here's David Green, who's a former Georgia quarterback and a great one, who's watching these games very closely, saying, I didn't exactly feel like I could know right ahead that they were establishing that balance. And if you're, when you do establish that way, you are keeping the opposing team, at bay. You're keeping the opposing defense from knowing what is exactly coming. And against Kentucky on Saturday, it becomes even more important here because the one thing we know about Kentucky is that Kentucky does have a very good pass rush. Pass rush is made easier when the guys that are doing the pass rush, Allen and Daniel and that crew, when they're able to pin their ears back because they know that they've only got one job, which is to get to the quarterback. But when Georgia keeps things balanced, when Georgia keeps that ratio of run to pass relatively, at least close enough to even that anything can be expected, and when it stays ahead of schedule, ahead of the chains here, making its hay on first and second down to make third down more manageable, all of a sudden it does become much more difficult at that point in time to really deal with what Georgia's bringing to the table. I think that's a really interesting point there from David Green, and it's one of the reasons why, frankly, I'm excited about seeing Georgia again on Saturday. Because listen, we've said all week long, and I'll bring out my visual aid here to mention this to you again here, the notion of Own the East. I've had my Own the East T-shirt on the set with us all week long here. That's the three words that matter this week. But that's not the only thing that matters here for Georgia. It's also an attempt to prove that a corner was turned against Florida. That surely, truly, the way that in 2017 the Auburn game ended up being the loss that sparked the wins that would follow, that maybe the same thing was true for LSU as well. And the improvement started to take shape against Florida and then went to another gear and another level against Kentucky, because this is a real team. No matter what, the Fox Sports college football analysts say, or the radio host there on Fox Sports Radio, no matter what they say, Kentucky is a real team. And it does take a legitimate effort from Georgia to win this game. But there were glimpses and there were moments in the Florida game that make you think that truly is possible, that Georgia can actually build towards something on Saturday against the Wildcats. And I think a lot of that does center around on the offense here, getting comfortable with the hierarchy in the wide receiver position, with the ability to run the ball on first and second down, which makes the third down play calls a little bit more difficult to predict. I think it's a really interesting thing to think about. And I thought that David Green brought up a really good point when he discussed that a moment ago. And now, with that said, let's keep DawgNation Daily rolling here.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Really good stuff from David Green, and always terrific to have him here on DawgNation Daily. We got plenty more Georgia stuff coming up for you here as well in our program. I want to do some recruiting stuff in a minute, but before we get to that, Thursday is always one of my favorite days to look in on some of the other big SEC games of the weekend. We call it our MyBookie Best Bets, and listen, MyBookie is the sports book to think about right now, because in addition to just picking the games that we do here on our program each and every week, that's not the only way you can get involved in the action when it comes to MyBookie. You can also do the parlay stuff where, you may bet a little bit money on a chance to win a lot of money. You pick three winners, and at that point in time, the parlay cashes in a big way. That's a great way to do that. You've also got the college basketball season coming up. It actually starts next Tuesday. What a great series of games. Kentucky-Duke, by the way, next Tuesday. Michigan State, Kansas. Kick off the college basketball season. I think the college basketball is one of the great things to bet on. I think it's a lot of fun to bet on college basketball. So that's also out there for you as well. Really fun stuff. You can do that at MyBookie. It's the place where the pros play, not just in college football season, really all year long, even with the college basketball season getting started there as well. And don't forget, a great chance to get your action started there at MyBookie is taking advantage of their great offer. If you use the promo code DawgNation right now, that's all one word, spelled the way it's supposed to be, DAWG, all one word, DawgNation. You can get your first deposit matched up to 50%, but you got to act right now. Find MyBookie online. That's MyBookie. Find MyBookie online, and then use the promo code DawgNation. Your first deposit can be matched up to 50%. With that said, let's do our MyBookie Best Bets here and the action for the weekend. And I was talking to some folks before our show started here. To me, this is actually a fairly difficult crop of games to pick. Now, I have a way of making them all seem difficult, but for me, this is a fairly difficult crop. Let me start with the game of the week in college football. Alabama LSU is getting all the hype here, all the discussion. Alabama's been about a 14.5-point favorite on the road here. This is, as we pointed out, depending on which historical record you pay attention to, is about as big a home underdog as LSU's been in 20 years. They are getting 14.5 points here as a MyBookie best bet. And believe it or not, while I don't like them to win the game, I am going to take LSU plus the points here. I'm going to take LSU plus the points as a MyBookie best bet. Part of my reason for thinking that is all week long I have really liked the under here. The under is the expected total number of points scored by both teams added together. The number's been about 54, depending on when you've seen that at MyBookie this week, about 54 here. I like this game to go under. I think that Alabama, given the respect for LSU's secondary, given the fact that linebacker Devin White's not going to play in the first half of this game, I think that Alabama's going to choose to run the football here. Plus, I just think that Nick Saban wants to show that he can still win that way, that he hasn't become such a pass-happy, pass-first type team. I think he wants to lean on his running backs. I think he's comfortable in a game that's relatively low scoring, that LSU has no chance to win. I think he's comfortable maybe making this game not be quite so much about Tua Tagovailoa. I don't think LSU is good enough to win this game. I don't think LSU scores a lot of points. I think Alabama may be comfortable, though, in a relatively conservative game plan in what could be an intense environment. I think they know that avoiding mistakes essentially guarantees victory. I think they'll do that low-scoring game, which means maybe a little closer. Plus 14.5 LSU for me is a MyBookie best bet. I'll also say MyBookie best bet here for Missouri. At Florida, Gators are a 6-point favorite. I just think there's too much being patted on the back here for Florida somehow keeping it within 19 points versus Georgia. I think that's obscene, the way that Florida has essentially passed out participation trophies for a goal line stand and some things like that enabled them to keep it a little closer than it was a year ago against the Dogs last week. Missouri can score, and Missouri may be a little bit irritated by, I think, getting robbed by the officials against Kentucky last week. So Missouri, I believe, going to Gainesville, getting some points back here. I think they may find a way to keep that close. I'm going to take Missouri as a MyBookie best bet. Let me also give you South Carolina and Ole Miss here for a moment. This is a very difficult game to handicap, and apparently the folks in MyBookie feel the same way. Last check, it was even there. It may be a little bit different depending on when you see it. South Carolina at Ole Miss. Here's the issue. There's really nothing necessarily that South Carolina does really, really well. There is one thing, though, that Ole Miss does well. So with that in mind, I'm going to take the one thing that I know that Ole Miss can do, which is score. I don't know the one thing that necessarily South Carolina is going to do here. So give me the very good offense for Ole Miss against the sort of average on both sides of the ball South Carolina. I'll take the home team in kind of an even money pick-em situation. Give me the Rebels here as a MyBookie best bet. I may live to regret that, but nonetheless, that's the play for right now. I'll also take Auburn this is one of those weird point spreads as well, given how bad Auburn's played. But I think in this case, the folks at MyBookie know something that the rest of us don't. Auburn, I think, a favorite for a reason here. I'm going to assume the bookmaker's getting this one right. I'll take Auburn as a favorite against Texas A&M. I'll make the Tigers minus the 4 a MyBookie best bet, and I'll make that your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, before we get back into the Georgia talk and I update you on a couple of very important things involving a couple of UGA recruiting targets, let me also remind you as the calendar turns to November, it's time to start thinking about that holiday time of the year, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year, everything else. And, of course, at Kroger, that means thinking about Merry Meal Kits. They're available at your local Atlanta Kroger just in time for Thanksgiving, and you can enjoy a turkey or a spiral ham. Sides like smashed potatoes or vegetables. Also includes a pumpkin pie for dessert. Go to yourorderonline.com. That website, once again, yourorderonline.com today to place your online order. Now, you need to make sure you do that before November 15th in time for a Thanksgiving there. So really good stuff from Kroger. A great way to make sure you're all locked and loaded and ready to go for this Thanksgiving season. Speaking of being locked and loaded, that is also what Georgia hopes to be for its 2019 class. And one of the guys that I think Georgia fans consider to be a part of that 2019 class, does he consider himself to be a part of that class? You know, yesterday, speaking of Kroger, we had Before the Hedges presented by Kroger, and we got a chance to hear from the 4-star linebacker, Tresman Marshall, who Jeff Sintel, our buddy and DawgNation's recruiting insider, had a chance to spend some time with on Friday. Jeff attended his game there. And in the conversation, there'll be more of this coming at DawgNation.com and a little bit of additional context. But certainly when Marshall talks about his relationship with Georgia and his relationship with other schools, it certainly doesn't sound like he considers himself a rock-solid UGA commit. Is this a reason for Georgia fans to be worried? Let me let you hear 4-star linebacker Tresman Marshall in his own words here.
I'm really focused on my season, and it's hard to, get into the recruiting and then stay focused on your season. So I'm just I just feel like it's going to come to me where I want to go. I'm not really looking big into a school. I'm looking for academics. Like, I know a school can give you that at the academics. All 4 of my schools anyway. Well, 3. All 3 of my schools.
Are there 3 now? Are there just 3?
Yeah, I'm applying to 3 schools. I started applying this week. The Auburn, Tennessee, and Georgia. So, and I'm still looking at Florida State, but right now they're my 3. And if it changes, I'll let you know. But I don't know right now.
One of the things kind of funny about that is that when Georgia fans have thought about losing Marshall, one of the places they thought about losing him was to Florida State. Now, Marshall, when he speaks there, doesn't exactly include Florida State. Among his most likely suitors, he's saying he's applying to 3 schools, Tennessee and Auburn and Georgia. But certainly doesn't sound like from Marshall's standpoint he necessarily considers himself a Georgia commit who's not looking around at any other schools. Now, he did give some other quotes to Jeff Sintel. You'll have to read those in an upcoming Sintel Intel at DawgNation.com. But I think that's really interesting. Georgia's obviously got a lot of linebackers it's in pursuit of here for 2019. Ryan Davis, who's already a part of this class, and Nakobe Dean, that Georgia fans hope to be a part of this class. But when you think about the need that Georgia has at linebacker, I think there's no such thing as too many elite athletes and elite players at that position right now. So I still remain hopeful that Marshall will be a part of this class, but it sounds like Marshall, at least based on that audio, is looking forward to keeping his options open. How about on the other side of the ball here for a moment? Something else we heard on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger yesterday. Jaden Hazelwood, decommits from Georgia, talked about the lack of the passing game for the Dogs being one of the reasons why. Well, Georgia did throw the ball a little bit better against Florida this past Saturday. Was Hazelwood impressed with that? It depends, I guess, here. Here is Hazelwood with his thoughts on all of a sudden a Georgia passing attack that's become a bit more potent.
Since you've decommitted, it looks like the program you were committed to is throwing the ball. Have you noticed that? What are your thoughts on it?
I haven't been watching UGA, but fans have been tweeting at me.
They've been telling you.
So I heard they've been throwing the ball more.
So kind of interesting that Hazelwood says, I actually haven't been watching. He's busy. He's living his life as a high school senior here, and but he has heard that. And I think when you read more of what Jeff has with Hazelwood at DawgNation.com, it gives you a sense that this is still a very interesting recruitment. Now, as a fan of Georgia, I do still remain optimistic that Hazelwood's going to be in this class. But obviously, with every quote you hear from Hazelwood, you reveal the fact that this is still kind of a complicated deal, and exactly what Hazelwood's looking for, he either doesn't know or he's keeping his cards very close to the vest here. But this remains a player that Georgia desperately needs. They need the big impact 5-star wide receiver, and I think eventually this is going to have a happy ending for the Dogs fans. All right, we will get ready to wrap up today's program, and I am really, really enjoying our brand new feature to the show here. And I've heard from a couple of you on the notion of the way we've kind of altered our Gator hater stuff here. I just felt like it was time to kind of blaze a new trail on this. You know, Georgia, when we first started the Gator hater countdown 2 years ago, Georgia was looking for a win against Florida. Well, now it's sort of basking in the glow of 2 straight here. So over the course of the rest of this year through 2019, and for many years I think to come after that, we're going to celebrate that part of this by doing our Gator Hater Updater, reminding you how long it's been since any Dog fan had to listen to any trash talk from any Florida Gator here. Well, today, our Gator Hater Updater, and I will show this to you on your screen, I am proud to say that the Gator Hater Updater now has climbed to 733 days. 733 days of Dogs being on top in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. That is good stuff. Hope to see you tomorrow. We'll get ready for the big one on Saturday against the Wildcats, and we'll talk to you then right here on DawgNation Daily. And on video, we'll get a chance to get some of your comments on anything from today's show. Really appreciate you being a part of it. And the good thing is we got a nice little block of time here. So this is about as much, time we've had for comments in a while without being, just running, way, way late or anything like that. So good stuff there on that regard, and certainly appreciate all of you for being a part of it. Let me pop over here and we'll kind of get rolling. Hope you all had a happy Halloween. Al Birchfield says, first year listening, good show. Al, thanks so much. We really appreciate the kind words there. Jeremy Hunsley says, Eddie's one good-looking rodent. Yeah, listen, I think that Eddie's a lot more handsome than Dan Mullen is. A lot more handsome. I need to get some better adhesive for his sign here. But, yeah, I think Eddie's a good-looking guy here. Unfortunately, Eddie can't see how good-looking he actually is, but he's a good-looking guy. Will Scott says, B.A., give me some Kentucky tickets. Yeah, listen, I'd love to be able to give all of you tickets. That'd be great. Hayes Calloway says it was good to see you. Hayes, good to see you as well. Hayes was at our Marlowe's broadcast the other day. It was great to see him there as well. John William Adams says, BA, are you traveling to the game or working in the studio? Not brave enough to ask my wife for a third road trip in a row. So similar situation for us here. After having been on the road for LSU, been on the road for Florida, we are going to take a home game here on Saturday, and we'll do the Northside Hospital postgame show from our DawgNation World Headquarters studio. So we'll still be with you for the postgame show. Just no Kroger kickoff because we will not be there in Lexington. But the postgame show, as you've come to expect, we'll still have that. We'll just be we'll be right here in our DawgNation World Headquarters studios for that. So we'll see you after the game for that for sure. Let me get some more comments here. I'll pop over to YouTube here in a moment as well. So Miriam Martin Corbin asked the same thing about changing mine going to Lexington. You need to go, man. Miriam would love to be there, but we will be in our studio and providing you the same coverage you've come to expect. But Miriam, I appreciate you saying that. But we'll look forward to it being with you after the game. Tavares Taylor says that Dan Mullen can shoot some hoops. Is he a good basketball player? I've seen him play dodgeball. There was that one video they showed back in the offseason of him playing dodgeball. I didn't know that he was a hooper. I bet I could take Mullen in a one-on-one game, though. I'll like in a half-court situation, I'll just back him down. You know what I'm saying? I'll just kind of turn my back and just kind of back him down. I feel like I could probably do that. Now, if it involves 94 feet worth of running, I may not be quite at my best. But in a half-court situation, for sure. Brian Friedman says, is there anyone fired up for basketball? Listen, I love the way that Tom Crean's trying to sell this program right now. I do believe they have an exhibition versus West Georgia tonight. Is that right? For those of you going to Lexington, I don't know if you care about this one way or another. Kentucky actually has an exhibition the Friday night before the Georgia game on Saturday, if you're going to be up there that night. But, yeah, I mean, I'm certainly excited to see what Tom Crean brings to the table here. Connor Sweeney says, should we expect a DawgNation invasion to Lexington? I'm sure there'll be a DawgNation invasion, but you'll have to take some pictures and share it back here with me. I look forward to those of you who are going. Make sure you share some pictures on social media because we'd love to see. We'd love to see how DawgNation does take this one over if it indeed does happen. Oh, this is a good number from Randy Bond. Randy says, with a win, where did Randy go? Let me make sure I got this right. Or the right name, but I believe it was Randy Bond. Yeah, Randy Bond says, with a win over Kentucky, Georgia will have swept the East 2 years in a row. That's kind of cool, right? That's a pretty cool deal. Not just own the East, but sweep the East. We do love that. We love that. Good stuff, Randy. Thanks for reminding us of that pretty important factoid. Dan Riggins says, did B.A. play that ridiculous Gator costume hype video yesterday? I don't know if we did that for a Halloween yesterday, although we should have. He says it seems appropriate for Halloween. Yeah, we should have done that. PK Buys Houses says, with the concern over UGA's run defense, what is the likelihood they'll be able to contain Kentucky's run game? I mean, obviously that's something that you got to improve upon here. I mean, I think that two things are true simultaneously. I think on the one hand, Georgia does really need to improve its its rush defense. There's no doubt about that. I think that Kentucky, when I think about them being a formidable foe, even though Benny Snell gets a lot of attention, a lot of hype, I actually view the Kentucky defense being the bigger issue for Georgia than the offense. I mean, Snell, a lot of his numbers are high-volume numbers. This is not a guy that's running for like 9 yards a carry or anything like that. So, no disrespect here to Snell, and I wouldn't want the Georgia coaches or players to say this, but when I think of truly elite running backs, I actually don't think of Benny Snell. Now, Georgia's also given up some rushing yards to backs that are anything other than truly elite. So it doesn't mean that you have to be elite to unfortunately run on Georgia's defense this year. But the thing that Kentucky has that's championship level is its defense. Benny Snell's the most famous player on this team. But Snell's actually not, to me, as formidable as what's going to happen defensively here. Crow King 123 says, hey, BA, how do you like our odds of getting Chaney back? I think a lot still yet to be written about this coaching staff in the offseason. Oh, I'm sorry. You're not talking about Jim Chaney. You're talking about Rashad Chaney. I think that Rashad Chaney's going to probably end up elsewhere. So, Chaney was a one-time Georgia commit, and he ends up going to Alabama. That commitment doesn't stick. He ends up decommitting. I guess he decommitted yesterday, but I don't believe that Rashad Chaney is going to be on Georgia's radar here. And I apologize for getting Rashad Chaney confused with Jim Chaney. But I don't believe that I think that Rashad Chaney is going to end up looking around at some other different places. Oh, Brian Kephart on YouTube also brings up a good point. Did anyone see the clip of the pregame speeches between Kirby and Mullen? I sure do love our coach. Had me ready to run through a wall. So this was actually really good. It's SEC Inside. It's one of those shows on the SEC Network. And then they toggled back and forth between Smart and Mullen. And I would have played some of the audio for you here on DawgNation Daily. The truth is, Kirby Smart said a word that we don't typically put on the airwaves here. Now, it's fine for him to say it. We don't typically broadcast that here. So that's one of the reasons why we didn't play it here. But it is really fascinating to see the contrast. And obviously, around here, we're prone to like Kirby more than Mullen anyway. But in this particular case, I mean, Kirby does have you ready to run through a brick wall. Very, very intense with his pregame message. Dan Mullen, on the other hand, I just feel like he's kind of missing something. Now, Mike Bianchi from the Orlando Sentinel have you believe that in 2 years, Dan Mullen's going to be the next, Vince Lombardi. But nonetheless, in this particular instance, there's just an edge and a demeanor that Kirby Smart seems to be bringing to the table that in that pregame moment, Dan Mullen's having a hard time matching. And when you put those two things side by side and you toggle back and forth between the two, you really get the sense of that. I did think it was very interesting. Richard Lurch says it was a great clip, and it really was. I thought it was a great clip, and I'm glad Brian Kephart brought that up here on the program today. Lynn Johnson Shipman says, I watched the SEC Inside Episode 2. What about Godwin lying down the ground and catching those passes one-handed? That was sweet. So I haven't seen the whole episode. I just saw the clip that was shared on social media. But you may remember, I mentioned this the other day. I think it was during our comment portion. One of the coolest things to watch pregame is these receivers doing their one-handed, I don't even know if they're drills or they're just showing off. I don't really know if that's a necessary skill for going out, playing the game. But these guys who are receivers, Godwin and Hardman and, all these guys, it is amazing how they catch a ball one-handed. I'm not talking about from me tossing it to them. I'm talking about from Fields, like slinging it to them, like, really spinning it. And, they can catch it one-handed like you're catching a baseball in a glove. There's some really cool stuff that these guys are able to do. Incredible athletes, and the one-handed catches are always really cool. A lot of really good stuff. Let me get a few more here. Travis Goff on the subject also of Rashad Chaney, who was at one point in time committed to Georgia and was at Alabama until recently. B.J. Wise pointing out the irony of the fact that we're not going to be doing a Kroger kickoff from a Kroger field there in Lexington. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. But listen, we'll have great video coverage on Saturday. It's going to be really fun. B.J. Wise says the one-handed stuff definitely is a drill. It teaches you how to catch it with heavy I guess pass interference. The gloves make it much easier than it looks, though. That may be true. John McMillan on the subject of those one-handed catches. I just think stuff like that's really amazing because, first of all, you got to have just catcher's mitts for hands to do some of that kind of stuff anyway. You got to have really, big hands. Chase Smith says it seems like the media has been hyping Kentucky. Now the Dogs are in trouble, so not buying the disrespect. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting, and I tried to point this out, there's an interesting conflict or contrast with the way that Kentucky feels disrespected by some national media people, although it's worth pointing out that almost all those so-called national media people are the Fox Sports guys who are maybe have a vested interest in talking up somebody else. There is some of that while the point spread's kind of going down here. Ultimately, during the offseason, I talked a lot about the wishful thinking that the SEC East wouldn't be as boring as the SEC West has turned out to be. And even if the outcome ends up being, the same preordained idea that we thought it would be back in the summer, Georgia winning and Georgia sweeping the division, it's actually ended up being probably interesting enough. The Georgia-Florida rating a week ago was huge. Did y'all catch this? How many eyeballs were in front of that thing on CBS? Because there was enough media buzz that maybe Florida could be Georgia. The same thing's probably true here this week. I think that, listen, Kentucky's not a big name brand program, though the ratings probably suffered a little bit. A lot of folks may be waiting to tune in at 8 p.m. when Alabama and LSU start. But, for the most part, even if the outcome is the same, the East hasn't quite been as boring as some people maybe thought it would have been. Just based on the fact that, Florida had a high ranking when Georgia played them, and Kentucky has a high ranking right now. So, there is a little bit of, hype here, but ultimately hiding below all of this, hiding below all of the high rating for Kentucky and a lot of chatter, positive and negative with the Wildcats, point spread moving in the direction of Kentucky here. The overall stat stuff just hasn't really changed. I know that some of you are stat skeptics, that you don't buy into that, and obviously no stats ever going to accurately predict the outcome of 100% of games. They just simply give you some suggestion about what the most reasonable prediction might be. And the overall advanced stats here, the overall profiles of these two teams still suggest this is a game in which Georgia should definitely win, possibly win convincingly. If you want to rank the most likely outcomes here, the most likely outcome, I believe, is a convincing Georgia victory, 2 touchdowns or so. The second most likely outcome is a close Georgia victory. The third most likely outcome is a close Kentucky victory. I just think that, I'd be somewhat surprised if this game is very close late in the game. I'd be blown away and shocked if Kentucky actually won. This is one of those moments in which everybody in Lexington wants to be a believer here. This is the biggest football game that's been at Kroger Field in heaven knows how long. But I do believe that Georgia's going to crush some dreams on Saturday. I do believe. Nick Lurch says the national press has never liked us, meaning Georgia. I don't think they're going to start now. I don't know why. They just don't. So I think that's an interesting point from Nick. And obviously everybody's got their own perspective on this and their own opinion. I do truly believe, and I referenced this a moment ago, and I've said this I think kind of a lot, that I don't believe there's any kind of inherent bias against Georgia on the part of the national media. I just think the media doesn't want stuff to be boring. I just think the media is scared to death of boat races, scared to death of, hey, at the beginning of the season, we already know that Georgia's going to sweep the East and win this division going away, and that no game's going to even be close. I think that's a really bad storyline for the media. So there's a wishful thinking attempt towards talking up some other team, whether it be Florida, whether it be Kentucky, whether it be, a few weeks ago with South Carolina. There is wishful thinking here to talk somebody up because there's this hope that somebody can do something to make this interesting. And the truth is, if I'm talking about, the SEC West, I'm probably doing the same thing. I'm looking for a potential challenger to Alabama just because I don't want to be bored to death by Alabama winning every game by 40 points. So when it comes to a national media opinion of Georgia, that's truly what I believe is going on. It's not anti-Georgia as much as it is anti-chalk. Chalk meaning the most likely outcome actually occurring. I believe there is a hope here that something will happen that surprises us compared to what we thought was going to go down. David Humansky says they don't trust Georgia because of the Mark Richt hangover. Now, that's a different topic, and you may be somewhat true on that. That there is this thing of, Georgia's thought it was good before, and it ended up not living up to all that. I do believe, I used the phrase rubber stamp earlier. I do believe there's a tendency to rubber stamp storylines year over year, time over time. Georgia being good but not quite able to break through. There may be a sense in which UGA is victim to people just assuming that's always going to be the case. I think that Kirby Smart's doing a lot to change that for Georgia. But it could be true that some of that is indeed happy. Excuse me, not happy. I think I was looking at something down here. Happening. Luke Bird, the reason why I say happy is because Luke used the word happy in his comment. He says Kentucky should be happy. Granted, they won the game against Missouri, but he goes on to, I think, say that that game was far from on, there was some chicanery there at the end of that game. I know a lot of people had a lot of stuff to say about the controversial way that ends up ending. Trey Smith says media hypes Kentucky and says the Dogs are in trouble. And when the Dogs win, they'll say Kentucky wasn't even that good to begin with. Yeah, I understand the frustration that some fans have about that because it seems like that kind of stuff does kind of pop up and happen from time to time. Let me get a few more YouTube comments here. String Gene says pulling for LSU this week also. Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing Alabama get scared a little bit. I wouldn't mind that. K9 Blue says Rich on it. He's to another commenter. There's a show called SEC Inside. That's the one that we were kind of referencing earlier. That's exactly right. And that, I guess it profiles a different pair of teams each week. Yeah, it does indeed. All right, let me get ready to get out of here. Arlie Garnella says, I hope to see Justin Fields play the entire fourth quarter this weekend. Yeah, that'd be nice to see. First of all, I mean, I do think that Georgia fans are going to see more of Fields at some point in time this year. I do indeed think that. And I think that could happen against Kentucky because Georgia's, blowing out the Wildcats. That'd be a lot of fun here. I think that's a great way to finish off our conversation here today. We appreciate you being a part of DawgNation Daily here today and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. We'll have DN90 coming up in a couple of minutes with a little bit more on what's happening around DawgNation here. And we'll give our final thoughts on Georgia-Kentucky and that opportunity to own the East on Saturday. We'll do that with you once again tomorrow morning starting at 10 a.m. Y'all have a great day. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily presented by Marco's Pizza. We'll look forward to talking to you soon.